Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Best Western Motel in Plattsburgh, New York. It is the 25th of July, 2007, approximately 9:15 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could I have your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is John Neyenhouse. I was born in Plattsburgh, New York, 16 November 1919.
Okay. What was your educational background before you went into service?
I was in my second year of college and had obtained my private pilot's license, and realizing that things might get a little bit uncomfortable, so I wanted to be sure and get my pilot's license. I figured that would help me when I got into service.
Mm-hmm. You'd always wanted to fly?
I've always wanted to fly.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of plane did you get your license in?
A Piper Cub, a small airplane.
Uh-huh.
And you had to crank it, the prop to get it started. It's an old timer.
Mm-hmm.
But then December 7th came along, and my now wife, at that time a friend of mine, decided that things were going to change drastically.
Mm-hmm.
So we had been exempted from the draft until the end of the school year. But as soon as the December thing happened, why, they took all the exemptions away. So I hitchhiked to Albany and joined the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor? Do you recall that?
Yeah, we were having noonday lunch at my aunt's, at Harry Favreau. And then we went to the movie, and during the 2-hour movie period, we never said a word.
Mm-hmm.
But the next day, I hitchhiked to Albany, and I joined the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 50 of us in a small room, and there was a two-striper handling all the paperwork all alone. And he said, "Go back and tell your draft board that you're in the Air Force," and we would send the paperwork to them. So I went back and told the draft board that I was in the Air Force, and the chairman says, "Well, where is your paperwork?" I said, "It's coming." And he said, "Well, there are too many draft dodgers like you running around outside. Well, I'm going to get you in the Army." So next day, I went down and joined the Navy. Now I'm in the Navy and the Air Force. And about 3-4 days later, I get a letter from the draft board, report to the Army to be sworn. So I back to Albany, and I was now in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. So I figured something's going to happen here. So about 4 or 5 days later, I got a notice from the Naval people telling me to report to Pensacola for flight training. And in the same batch of mail, I had a letter from the Air Force telling me to report to Kelly Field for flying instructions. And I could think of those little bobbing ships out there, and I decided, I'm going to land where there's some solid land. So I went to join the Air Force.
Now,
again.
Now, being that you had a pilot's license, did that exempt you from any specialized training at all? I mean, did you?
Well, when we got to flight training in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, there was a civilian instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and there were 6 of us assigned to him. And the first question he asked, "Do any of you people have a license?" And I think there were 3 of us raised our hand. He said, "Well, forget everything you learned there. You're going to start all over." So anyway, I finished the flight primary training, went to Randolph Field, and got basic training.
Let me just ask you, with your primary training in the Air Force, what kind of aircraft did you train on?
I think they were PT-19s,
Okay.
open cockpit.
Okay.
And along that same line, they assured us that we should always fasten our safety belt.
Mm-hmm.
And the following week, 5 students were dumped out of the airplane because they didn't have their safety belts on. Of course, they were high enough so that the parachute opened and they were all right. But I guarantee you there were no more safety belts after that. But we went to, I went to Randolph Field for basic, and we flew PT-13s or PT-50s. Then I went across town to Kelly Field for advanced training, and they had AT-10s, plywood airplanes, twin engine. And after that, graduating from there, I went to Tampa, Florida for transition into B-26 twin engine medium bombers. And they had a big sign, one a day in Tampa Bay. And that was very thrilling to read that.
What did that sign mean?
Well, the B-26 never, as I understand it, never had been really flight tested and experimented with. So they just shoved them into the Air Force and said, here, fly them. So we had quite a few accidents. For example, one day, we used to fly 3 hours in the morning, and then 4 hours in the morning, and then 4 hours for ground school and possibly night flight. And I had been out for 6 hours, or 4 hours flight training and 4 hours ground school. And a friend of mine asked me to fly co-pilot because his co-pilot was getting married before he went overseas. So I said, sure, I figured I could get in there and sleep and everything would be fine. And it was a night mission to Waycross, Georgia. And at that training, we were flying about 50 feet off the ground all the while, low level all the while. And so we were just a very few minutes from Waycross, Georgia. And we were flying 6-man formation, 1, 2, 3, and you know. And so the guy on our right wing called and he said, Roberts, who was the pilot, your right engine's on fire. And so I looked back and I said, Jim, we gotta leave right now. So we got up to whatever height it was, not very high, and we all bailed out. And I landed in a potato field that had just been planted, and a grandfather and a grandson came rushing over to me. And they asked me, are you practicing? I said, no, this is the real thing. On the way down, I saw my pocketbook fly by me. We had the pockets in the knees.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't make it. So about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, my friend, my fiance, received the pocketbook from the Waycross, Georgia people. And which I had all my stuff in there, you know, and so that was pretty nice.
Now, had you ever used a parachute before?
Never bailed out before.
Uh-huh.
And they always told us to practice, you know, they go, count to 10 and pull the D-ring. And at our height, I figured 10 wouldn't cut it.
Mm-hmm.
So at 3, I pulled that thing, and I hit almost right after that. So I felt pretty lucky.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, the tail gunner had invited 2 friends from the kitchen to fly, and the first pilot had given them explicit instructions how to get out, you know, and all that stuff. But the 3 of them never made it out. They just didn't. Anyway, the next they rushed us to the infirmary, gave us a physical, said you're good, get flying. So the next day, a fellow by the name of Charlie White came up with a plane that he had been test hopping. So we got in the airplane and it was taking off down the runway and it sputtered 2 or 3 times, and I said, oh no, let me out. But it was all right, we landed. And come to find out, we had lost several planes like that. And they found that the main gas line had been just cut halfway through. So that when you were flying, after a while, the vibration. And so they figured there was sabotage there some way. But anyway, from there we went to Ypsilanti, Detroit, to pick up our airplanes. And we were test hopping, or whatever you want to call it. And while in the air, I heard a voice that I recognized as Bernard Thompson. He was a flight leader. And he said, get in trail. The next thing I knew, I heard the commander. They flew under a bridge or somewhere near something, and somebody reported them. So the colonel called, everybody on the ground. You know, I said, uh-oh, somebody's going to catch it now. But Thompson was a kind of a favorite with Colonel, and so he just got a little admonishment because we were trying to get assembled and get overseas, but we thought we were going to the China area because we had been issued clothing, light clothing. And we were told to fly down to Savannah, Georgia, where we got heavier clothing. And we got some orders which I wanted to bring in, couldn't find them. And we headed towards Canada, Goose Bay or Gander, Canada. And from there we flew to Iceland. And halfway over to Iceland, we heard this voice, I lost an engine, which was, not a good thing. And Norm Settle was the pilot. He'd gotten beyond the point of no return, so he had to go. And they threw everything out, and they continued on single engine. Now, in Greenland, we flew up a fjord and landed on a runway that ran uphill. At the end of the runway, there's a 10,000-foot mountain there. So they said, don't try to go around. Land. So here comes Settle on single engine. And he went around 2 or 3 times on single engine and landed. So anyway, from there we went to Greenland. And it was the 21st of June, 1942, I believe. And it was just like daylight out, we landed at midnight. And so we wanted to get something to eat because we'd been eating GI rations all the time. So we hitchhiked into Reykjavik. There was a hotel there. And there were 5 or 6 of us. Somebody had borrowed a Jeep. This was always happening in the service. And we got into the restaurant, and there was no menu. This is supper. It was potato soup with not too many potatoes. It was just a soupy something, but we were glad to get it. And from there we went down to Scotland. And we landed in Scotland and had lunch or something. And I looked down, there was a tall, blonde gentleman coming up serving. And we got closer, I recognized him as my principal from Peru High School. And he had 1 or 2 stripes, and I had a first lieutenant thing on him. So when he spotted me, he started serving me, and I was serving him from the high school days. And the guys at the table were laughing. What's the matter with you? You've been drinking. You don't serve on the enlisted man. Those days it was. So, and he put an article in the Plattsburgh Press. I wish I'd have kept it. Former student, or something about former principal and former student meet, and it was anyway. Then we landed at Chipping-Unger, where we were stationed, and at that time they said, when you fly 25 missions, you can go home. That's probably, I brought that sheet. If you look on that sheet, you'll see that the name Neyenhouse appears quite often. And I was working assistant operations officer, so I had the duty to make up the crews, and I made sure I flew every mission.
Now let me go back a little bit. The plane you brought overseas, did you continue to fly that plane? Was that your plane?
That was our plane. We got our transition in Tampa, B-26 Marauder, twin engine, and then we got new airplanes up in Detroit, and we flew those overseas.
Okay.
We flew those right along.
Now, did your plane have a name?
Yes, if you look on that second sheet, you'll see it there.
What was the name of the plane?
Hot Garders. When we first met, in that first picture, I said, okay, we got to have a name for this thing. So they came up with Hot Garders, and that was it.
Now, was there a woman painted on there too?
No, just a leg with a...
Oh, just a leg with a garter on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, who came up with that?
Well, our crew.
Uh-huh.
See, I said, okay, we got to have a name. Everybody else was putting names on their airplanes. And so the consensus of opinion was Hot Garders would be a good name.
Now, was that painted on your jacket also?
No, no, no. But it stayed with us, and here's what happened to that airplane. We were supposed to fly our 50th mission in that airplane, and I think somewhere it would bear that out. But we hadn't been on we hadn't had any leave or time off in a long while. So while we were at the briefing, word came down that 4 crews could take Saturday and Sunday off. So we happened to be one of them. So a brand new crew that just came over took our airplane.
Mhm.
And I think you'll see there on the 50th mission, hot Garders or whatever they called it in those days, was shot down. And so when I went to London, everybody did in those days. We were only 25 miles from London.
Mhm.
So some guys came in that hadn't realized there'd been a change. And this one guy came up to me and says, "What the hell are you doing here? You're dead." I said, "No, just touch me." And he said, "Well, your plane went down." I said, "Thank goodness I wasn't in it." So that was a close. But I got to be the first one to fly 25 missions. And that night at supper in the officers' mess, an announcement came. You must fly 30 missions before you go home. So I got to 30. You must fly 35 missions. And I gave up. We went right on upstairs.
Mhm.
But,
Now, what bomb group were you with?
387th Bomb Group.
Okay.
I meant to get a copy of that. I can. 387th Bomb Group, 8th Air Force, and then later on, when there were 9 or 10 groups of B-26s that came over, they changed it to the 9th Air Force.
Okay. And when you were with the 9th, whereabouts were you based?
Same place.
Same exact place?
Chipping Under, which is near Chelmsford, which is about 25 miles northeast of London.
Now, what were the majority of your bomb missions? What were your missions?
Well, we
Targets.
bombed bridges, roads, airdromes, and then when the D1, B2 came on, we bombed those sites, and it was mainly stuff like that. Now, we didn't have enough fuel to go way into Germany. We get right in the outskirts of Germany, Holland, Belgium, France. And when we first started flying, the British Spitfires were flying escort. But they only had enough gas to just about get to France. And there weren't too many Messerschmitts over the channel.
Mhm.
So when we got to France, we lost our fighter escort. And so later on, the Americans came and took over that, and they had tanks, and so they were able to escort us all the way around. And that was much more comfortable.
What do you think was your most dangerous mission? The one that maybe stands out more than other, or missions stand out?
The one that scared me the most was, I was scared on everyone. But anyway, we bombed, I think it was Holland or somewhere. And you heard me mention the name Bernard Thompson. Well, he was leading the group. And we used to bomb at between 10 and 12,000 feet. And so when we dropped our bombs, Bernie peeled off and he dove down. And we redlined that B-26, I think it was 280 miles an hour. Normally we'd fly 180 to 200 miles an hour. But when you take a plane to the extreme, hold on, you know, because it was too fast for us. But we made it out all right, and there was a lot of flak there. That's why. That was the one that's most scary. I think D-Day. My last mission was D-Day, and we were supposed to bomb at a certain altitude, but the clouds were too thick, so we had to go down lower. I don't know exactly what height we bombed. It was low, but we could feel the repercussions of the bombs. And we went back to England, and we were expecting to go again, but we just stood by our airplanes for the rest of the day, and they didn't call on us. So.
Did you see the fleet as you were crossing over?
As we were crossing over, it looked like, you probably heard this said before, but it looked like you could walk on the ships over there. They were so close. And see, we were to bomb from 6 o'clock to 6:25. I think the invasion was 6:30, I'm not sure. So we got out of there about 6:15 or 6:20.
What were your targets at that time?
They were I think they were cement bunker things,
Oh, okay.
stuff like that, you know, that time. And so it all ended up though.
What was the furthest you could go in a mission?
Well, we only had fuel for about 3 hours out and 3 hours back.
Mhm.
So it was on the border of Germany, probably.
Mhm.
And I think one of my biggest thrills was we bombed the railroad yard just beyond the Eiffel Tower. And I was looking for it all the way. You could just see it. I said, "There's the Eiffel Tower. Big deal." It was, but that was a thrill. But I don't know.
Were you or any of your crew ever wounded at all?
No, I got a little scratch. I think it was here. I was reaching up for the trim tabs, and I used to wear my watch on the right hand so I could see it. I don't know why, but a piece of flak just cut off the wristwatch and left a little tiny scratch there.
Mm-hmm.
And I see there was 8 men to a hut over there, and our outfit was the flight leaders, the medical doctor, and so Doc Ryan slept next to me, and he saw this Band-Aid I put on. He said, "What's that?" "Oh," I said, "a mosquito bit me or something." I don't know what it was. "So I can give you a Purple Heart." I said, "Doc, save it for the next time." But you know, it was funny because when we got over there, the sunshine was very absent. You know, didn't see too much sunshine, and so we could tell the replacements. They were mostly flying in the south, so they were well tanned, and us old timers, as it were pale. So what some guys would do, see, we got the DFC and the air medal and I don't know, 20 some odd ribbons and stuff like that. See, but we would wear our DFC under our collar. And you talk to these young guys who've been out of 1 or 2 missions, and some of them were very talkative and macho, you know. So they'd talk for a while, and then somebody raised his collar up. "What's that?" "Well, that's the DFC, that's 25 missions." "Oh, sorry." And it was fun in a way, and it was interesting, but I was glad to get out of there.
Mhm. Did you have much contact with the English people?
Quite a bit, well, quite a bit. Weekends every
Mhm.
once a month or something like that. But there were, and we didn't contact the people right around the base very much because, well, we were busy.
Mhm.
We didn't,
Did you ever get any R&R time where you went into London or any of the big cities? Or?
I got a 7-day pass once, well, all the time I was over there. And another guy over there, Charlie White, got one. So we went up to Scotland and the St. George Hotel. And we were sitting there, of course you had the uniform on. Home guard, or older fellows that were, they came over and wanted to know if we minded if we sat with them, so we sat with them. And they started drinking that Scottish whiskey. I had one drink and I said, "No more." And Charlie was already drinking a few more. You know? So we sat there from about 5 o'clock till about 9 o'clock talking. And I went to bed about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And so Charlie came up around 11, and man alive, he had rubber legs like you never saw. And the next day he was sorry. But we spent about 4 or 5 days touring around Scotland. But another thing that might be interesting was one of the co-pilots married a Red Cross girl from his hometown or something. And so they had a big meal for him. And he was supposed to catch a noon train or something. But everybody kept him there until it was 1:30 in the afternoon. And they were bemoaning the fact that they made reservations in southern England and that they were going to make it. So his name was Osher, Osier. And I told him, I said, "Bob, take your wife, put her a GI uniform on, put her hair underneath it, and get out to my airplane, and we will take you down right near that place. He said, you can't do that. I said, watch me. So we took, I got my engineer and myself, and we flew them down there. Then we came back, and of course, word spreads, you know. So when I got back, the operations officer says, Colonel Story wants to talk to you. So I went overseas. He said, where the hell have you been? Test hopping, Colonel, test hopping. Test hopping? He said, you went down to Southern England, because they tracked you, you know. And then I told him what happened. He said, get the hell out of here. So, I don't know.
Now, how did you get back to the States? After you were
I was told to report to northern Scotland. Can't remember the name right now. There were several thousands of people waiting to go back on a boat. And I had a trunk and some D4 bags and stuff like that. And 2 o'clock one morning, I was tapped on the shoulder, and they said, Major, you are to report to operations right away. I said, what am I going to do with this stuff? Leave it here, we'll send it to you. Take your musette bag and report to operations. So you're down to operations, and there's 3 other majors, myself. And I said, what's going on? You're supposed to go back on this plane that's out here. Whenever the pilot and the crew gets here. So, okay. So the pilot got us together. He said, I get private orders, sealed orders, can't open until I'm 10,000 feet, then I'll tell you where we're going. Well, it ended up, we went to Iceland. And furthermore, it was US-1, President Roosevelt's airplane. And so we get up there and they said, now listen, you guys stay in here because we're picking up the president of Iceland. Well, there was a guy with us called, he was Major Hively. He had joined the RAF, and he got become an ace of the RAF. Then he joined the Air Force when they got over there. And I think he had something like 14 or 15 kills. He was a hotshot. He had a British shirt on, making all the rules you can imagine. He had cowboy boots on. And he said, I'm not staying in this damn airplane, I'm hungry. So they had left the Jeep outside, so we went out, we got in the Jeep. And here's the Air Force contingent of the General Air Force and the Army people there. We drove all the way around, had a bite to eat, came back, got in the plane. And the pilot says, oh, now the president of Iceland's coming in here, and you do not go anywhere near him. You guys sit in the back. So, Hively, after we get in the air, Hively goes over, sits next to the president, talking to him. Oh, I said, George, we're going to get kicked out of here. Sure enough, we landed in Canada, they kicked us the hell out of the airplane. This Hively was a character. But we had some funny things happen in training too. We watched in Austin, they had a Thanksgiving football game. We were to fly a 3-hour triangular mission to practice. So Austin was one of our checkpoints, the first one. So we flew there, we could see this football game going on. So we lowered down to about 500 feet. We circled for about 45 minutes, watched the football game. And then we caught hell for that too. But anyway. By the way, when we bailed out over Georgia, we all got the special ribbon. I was going to bring it to it, I forgot it.
Is that the Caterpillar ribbon?
Caterpillar Club, yeah. And I've shown that to people and say, what's a Caterpillar Club? If you don't know what it is, you don't want to know. But another time we were in training, a guy by the name of Bob Nisley, Neyenhouse in the north, we were together all the way through this thing. And one of our checkpoints was the Rio Grande. But it was during the season when it was fairly dry. And I suppose we weren't watching very much. We flew right through that cotton picking thing. So all of a sudden we could see nothing but desert and stuff like that. And there's a railroad station, one building. So I said, let's go down and see what the name on that thing is. That'll help us. So we flew over that about 50 feet. There was a bunch of kids playing. And they were throwing rocks at us. So we got out of there. The name was in Mexican or Spanish or something. So, but what really happens when we got back, see, we were way overdue. And they were looking for us. And we were probably 30 minutes late because so they almost grabbed us, they almost washed us out. But we were close to graduating, so they figured we'd let them go one more time.
Now, after you returned to the States, what were your duties? You were
Well,
still...
I wanted to get home because I was told, or the rumor was that we would be going to B-29s, to fly B-29s. So when I got back to the States, I flew with the Air Transport Command. And I flew a lot of different airplanes. And one day, I was the pilot control officer, and I think we had about 200 pilots in that group. And what we would do was taxi airplanes, whatever they were. They had converted the B-24 into a tanker by putting these, these kerosene tanks you see outside of houses.
Mm-hmm.
They put a bunch of those in there. And we would fly them to Long Beach, and somebody take them from there and go to Karachi with them. And so one time we were coming back, and I heard, you're always looking for another airplane to fly the route, you know. So there was a C-54, 4-engine, at Oak City, Oklahoma. And I went there and with a co-pilot and an engineer, and asked for an airplane going east. They said, yeah, we got a C-54 going, but it isn't ready yet. Go have supper and come back. It was supposed to be empty. And when we got back, there were 50 or 60 people. And I looked at the manifest, I said, oh, I had never flown one of those before. And we had a little black book. And any airplane you flew, you were supposed to have a checkout with a pilot that was familiar with it. And I was the boss man, so I could initial anything I wanted in my head. So I initialed it and I'd flown and I showed it to the guy. He says, okay. So it was almost midnight and we loaded up and I said to the Captain Roberts, I said, you ever flown one of these? He said, no. Engineer, you ever flown one of these? No. I said, that's good. Neither one have I. Neither have I either. So I said, engineer, get the emergency book out and start reading. So we took off, I think it was midnight, we landed in Miami. And there was a full colonel, a surgeon, doctor from the medical institute. And he came over, he said, Major, that was the most beautiful ride I've ever had. How much time you got in these? I said, Colonel, when did we leave Oak City? Oh no, he said, I'll never fly with the Air Force again. But after I got out, I went to, I applied at 45 different places. I went to Teterboro first. Teterboro was like the unemployment place for pilots. And the girl there told me, you're too old. So what do you mean too old? They're looking for pilots that are 20, 21 years old. Because they were starting to flood the market with old timers like myself. So we sent out 45 applications. I got one reply. Report to 4 Park Avenue, New York City on such and such a day. So I showed up at noon and the girl looked at my clothes and be out at JFK in those days, or not JFK, Idlewild at midnight, and you're going to get some transition. I said, okay, you're hired. So
now, how old were you at that time?
My late 20s probably.
Okay.
Somewhere in that area. And there were 4 of us, and we went from there to Connecticut, Bradley Field. We each shot a couple landings. It was about 4 o'clock by the time we got back, and the pilot said, Neyenhouse, report to operations at 7 o'clock. I said, 7 o'clock tonight or tomorrow? He said, this morning. 3 hours. I said, what's going to happen? He said, you're going to Europe. I said, I don't have any. You want a job? Be there. So I took off. I had my shaving kit. And it used to take us 6 hours to fly from New York to Goose Bay. 12 hours from Goose Bay to Ireland. And then we go from there to London, to Holland, and down to Munich. So, you know, in those days, the prop jobs, we fly 160, 70, 80 miles an hour, whatever it was. So it took quite a while to get to Europe in those days that way. And then we fly back the next day. And the first time into Munich, we got there, it was kind of late. And looking down the hall, there's pairs of shoes outside of every door. Well, some of our boys stopped at the pub. And when they came back, they mixed all the shoes up. You know.
Back.
Okay, they came in, they mixed all the shoes up. You know. So the next morning, the manager told us, "You're out. The whole crew, there's 6 of us. Get out of here and don't come back." So we had to go find another hotel. One of the other guys was dropping balloons full of water. That really put the clincher to it. We had to get out there for sure. But it's always somebody, you know. When I came back, they sent us to Air Transport Command, as I mentioned before. We got to fly so many different airplanes. It was a lot of fun. One Friday afternoon, a young lieutenant came in. He'd been flying a P-38, and his home was in Newark, New Jersey. That's where he was taking the airplane. Well, once you dropped your airplane off, they got you going right out of there to another source or back home. He says, "If I go up there, I'm going to be shuttled right back to California, and I don't want to do that." He said, "What can I do?" I said, "Just Red Cross that P-30. I had never flown a P-38. So, oil leak. So I called the ground chief and I said, "Don't touch that, don't pull a cowley on that thing. It's something you let me test out tomorrow morning." He said, "Well, I'll be here." I said, "Okay." So the next morning I went down, like at 9 o'clock, I did the P-38. I said, "Chief, come here." I said, "What do you want?" I said, "Can you start this?" He said, "You don't know how to start it? You start the sucker and I'll fly it." So he started it, and I took off, and he was, oh my, oh my. So I got up over New York, having a lot of fun doing all kinds of stuff. And I never went below a quarter tank on fuel. So I shifted to the auxiliaries. The thing I didn't know, in the bombers we'd been using gravity. In the fighters you turn on the booster pump before. Didn't turn them on, but all of a sudden things start, whoa, back on the mains again. And I could see Wilmington at 10,000 feet. It was a beautiful day. So I headed right down there, and I got a start and everything. And I landed, and I said, "You got a question?" He said, "I didn't think you'd be back." I said, "Well, I'm back, but I had a question." He says, "What's the matter?" I said, "When I turned on the auxiliaries, the engine started to quit." He says, "Did you turn on the boosters?" "Uh-huh. No, I didn't." But it was... But it... had a lot of fun flying in Air Transport Command, because new airplanes and different airplanes. So.
How long did you keep your license? Did you fly quite a bit after the war?
After I started flying commercially, I'd be gone for a week or 2 at a time. And one time I came back, and my youngest son did not know, he didn't want to come to me, he was scared. And I said, "That did it." So I went to the telephone and I resigned right there. Plattsburgh Air Force Base was just starting up, and I figured with my flying experience I'd get a good job. So I reported up there, and the only job they would give me was these, you know, the peanut bulb is a little tiny bulb for your in your car, for example. You know, your panel lights up. They call them peanut bulbs.
Oh yes, yes.
My job was to issue those. The guy said, "If you were in uniform, you would be useful, but you're not in uniform. So you want it? There it is. The lowest salary on the base." I said, "I'll take it." I quit my other job then. So anyway, there was a SAC Air Club, and I used to fly with that right along. Then I started to get high blood pressure and the usual stuff, so I couldn't pass my physical. Well, my wife's got us on a new regime, and we used blood test to make sure that everything's right. So the blood test is right down real good. So I said to her, you know, my license is dated 1940, and it's good forever, more or less. But you have to pass a physical, and if I wanted to fly any different airplane, I have to get checked out. Those are the restrictions. I couldn't pass the physical, so I had to quit flying the SAC airplane. Well, about 3 or 4 months ago, with blood tests showing everything real good, I went, took, and passed my flight physical. So now I can fly legally again. So it's more of a ego thing, you know.
So have you flown at all?
I flew over in Malone, there's a place over there, and I'm going back, and I want to get 2 or 3 more rides with an instructor, and then get out of here. Let me see what I can do.
So you're 87 years old, and you've taken up flying again.
More or less. I'll be 88 in November. But it's, you know, it's an ego thing. Oh, I'm going to shoot some landings. I guarantee you I'm going to shoot some landings. But I'm not going cross country.
Now, what kind of airplane are you flying?
Those are small airplanes.
Cessnas or?
Cessna 150, 170, something like that. So, I don't know.
Now, when you left the service, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
We bought a farm when I left the service. My father-in-law wanted to buy a farm next to his, and my wife was from a farm, and so we didn't, I didn't know what I wanted to do really. I wanted to continue flying, but and I did for a short while. But when my son didn't know me, I said, no, that's the end of that. So then I got the job at the base, and I became a contracting officer. And then I ended up as the vehicle maintenance officer, civilian type. So I continued to fly there. But when I went to take my physical and they kicked me out, I stopped flying in a hurry.
How about the 5220 Club? Did you ever use that?
No.
Okay. Veterans organizations.
Pardon?
Have you joined any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I have a life membership in the American Legion, the vets, and but I don't attend those very much because we're really busy. We got 2 or 3 businesses going, and so. But with 13 children also,
You have 13 children.
it keeps us busy.
I guess so. Now, when did you get married?
I met my wife in 1936, and then we got married after the service.
Oh, okay.
I was still in the service. 1944, August 29th.
Okay. It's good you passed that test. How did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Yes, there's about 5 or 6 that I'm still in contact with. There's a guy by the name of Bill Ewell, navigator in Virginia. He called me the other day and see Plattsburgh Air Force Base is trying to get some commercial flights in here. And he tells me there's an outfit that's going to fly from there, Myrtle Beach, to Plattsburgh. And I don't know, today's paper talks about another outfit. I saw the headlines very briefly. That it's coming in from Boston to Plattsburgh, so they're building up some business there.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
One thing is, being a bomber or a pilot, one thing I learned is to be very observant of everything that's going on around me all the while. You know, when you're flying, you're looking for fighters and you're looking for this, try to stay in formation. And in flying, you don't have a chance to make too many errors. You got a checklist and you better read it and follow it. So I think in that way, it's helped me carry it on right straight through. Because we'll be driving around and I'll say, well, did you see that? See what? I'm not running her down, but she never was trained to be, you know, right with that. But I think that's the one biggest thing I did. And also, I feel more responsible for more things than I probably would if I didn't. because when you're flying in a crew, you know, especially if you're sitting in the left seat, you've got to take care of everybody in your crew, more or less, and so make sure that everything's going good.
Okay.
Okay, now what I'll,
Okay, well,
okay, I'm thinking probably the best thing with this would be if we could set this up on the couch, and then you could stand next to it and maybe point.
I don't know about the glare.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
You want me to hold it?
No, that's good, just explain what each picture is.
This picture, top right, is a picture when our crew was first formed in Tampa, Florida, and this is our first acquaintance with the B-26. We've been flying much smaller airplanes, you know.
Okay.
And these pictures are pictures of our...
Oh.
Could you just point out where you are in that photograph? And
This is me right here. This is the co-pilot. This is the bombardier navigator. This is the radio man. This is the engineer. And this is the tail gunner.
Okay, and they're all gone now,
All
you
these
mentioned.
people have left us,
Okay,
except this guy on the right. They're left.
okay. And then the next picture?
Well, these are random pictures of the B-26 in different positions, and these are fellows that are clowning around. This fellow on the right is a doctor from another squadron. He had a twin brother who's a doctor in the 3rd Squadron. And this is a picture, it's just kind of a group picture. We were going from one place to another. I can't remember exactly where we were.
Okay.
Oh, is that your plane? What was it called? The Red Hot Carter?
No, this is.
That's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And you always had to run what they call run the props through. Oil would settle at the bottom of the jugs, as they call it. And you always had to run the props through 3 or 4 times to circle it. They're just playing around here and that. And this is a story about the B-26, and it says B-26 pilots make flying look easy, but it isn't.
And what about this picture? These pictures on this
This
side?
picture right here, I'm right here, that's the group of the flight leaders, and there's some navigators, pilots, and the bottom line of people there are people that worked in the office, operations.
Okay.
This picture here is a picture somebody took as we were lining up to take off on a mission. And the picture in the corner is me again. Waiting for a streetcar, I guess.
Now, when you went on a mission, how did you dress?
Well, one thing that happened, our group was the first group to go over as a group without losing any airplanes. And so Colonel Story said, okay, we're going to strip everything out of these airplanes. The heater, the air conditioning, anything that we can get rid of, we got to get rid of. So we dressed accordingly, you know. It's 40, 50 degrees on the ground, but at 12,000 feet, it's 30 below centigrade or something like that. So we had big, heavy boots, and we had pants, fleece line, and a jacket, and you had your earphones. You know, the pilot put the earphones over the left ear, co-pilot over his right ear, so we could talk back and forth. The only thing that was unprotected was there are throttles, and you had to almost do it barehanded. So you'd come back and your hand would look like a claw. You were so stiff, you know. But when we first started out, we had parachutes on our back. Then they improved it to parachutes on the chest. Parachutes that we sat on. Not on our back, we sat on those. Then we had these bundles that, now there's a funny little story there because we had American jackets, and we had British parachutes. Now, there's a hook on the chest thing for Americans. British had a ring here. They also had a ring on the parachute. So one day we're waiting to go on a mission, and I look at we would park the planes in hard stands, 3 airplanes in what they call a hard stand. And I looked over to a fellow named Spaulding, Dick Spaulding, and I saw rings here and rings on the, I said, Dick, put your parachute on. He said, what for? Put your parachute on. I can't do it. He had flown several missions where the parachute was worthless. So, hold everything. But then another thing that happened, when we get over there, we had Brussels sprouts and Spam, I think for 30 or 40 days. And we got so sick of that. Now somebody opened up a can of Spam, took the wrapping off, hung it on the mess hall. Packed in 1917 in Argentina. And we were eating that stuff. But, so anyway,
Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
well, I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh, no, no, excellent,
Very good interview.
thank you.